Hello, 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 and welcome to the College of Creation. My name is Dan.
And my name is Michael.
And we are Dungeons & Dragons DMs who love to homebrew items, spells, creatures, and features for D&D, and this is a show where we make new homebrew every week based on prompts that we get from our community. And this week, we were tasked with making some sort of divination feature mechanic, something that does not require the DM or the players to actually predict the future. It's a tricky situation with divination and like fortune telling in an improvised game. I do agree with the premise, I think, of this prompt that there is some lack when it comes to the features in the game that do try to mimic that at this point.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to do, especially the way that the things in the PHB, just published material in general, it has to be so universal that it's difficult to make true balanced published items that work for the vast majority of people. So it's tough.
It's really, really true. And glancing through, well, kind of doing the due diligence of sort of checking what is there in regards to this prompt, I came up with a number of things, and one of them was going through the existing divination spells that do some sort of like, pre-knowledge, foreknowledge situation. I gotta be honest, both augury and divination are okay spells, but really what they boil down to, the use case seems to be the players asking the DM, is this a good idea or not?
Yeah.
Like, is this plan that we're thinking of doing, is this a good idea? And that's a little disappointing. And then the biggest lack that I think of was the 9th level divination spell, Foresight, which gives a single target advantage on all D20 rolls for 8 hours.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's very boring. And it really doesn't capture the fantasy of it.
I am certain that yours is going to be much more profound than mine this week. I made 3 things. One of them is very silly. One of them is purely mechanics based, and one of them is purely narrative based. 3 totally different things with no connection. And I'm happy with all 3 of them. And I thought that it's just this is a week that I really just kind of like let the creative flood go out, and whatever was caught in the net is what I used.
Hey, I think that's great.
I'm fine with that.
And I think my actual creations are not that profound, but I have thoughts that I would like to share when we get there.
Okay.
That were more about my process than anything else. But before we get into it, I did want to touch on something because some announcements have been made recently here about some new stuff coming to the 2024 rules, some new additions and adjustments. I don't know if they're coming with a specific book.
It's in the Forgotten Realms source book.
Gotcha.
The upcoming Forgotten Realms source book.
Gotcha. So that's updating the Knowledge Domain Cleric, the Purple Dragon Knight Fighter, and the Bladesinger Wizard.
Yep.
And I think I haven't looked through them closely enough to have any sort of thoughts about them at a high level. But it made me think of a question for you, which is, what are the subclasses that you think either deserve the next update or that you really, really want to see updated and brought into cohesion with the 2024 rules?
Interesting. That's a good question. First of all, before I actually answer the question, it is a wild choice to update the Purple Dragon Knight. I think that is crazy. I will withhold any proper judgment until I actually read the new subclass, but it does not seem like it's following the same path as it was before, which is a good thing. Horrible subclass in 2014. interesting pivot to a completely different area and style of play, I think. So we'll see how that goes once it actually comes out. I think for me, one of the big ones has already been updated. The 4 elements monk, bad subclass in 2014. I really like the element monk now. So that would have probably been my first choice. I would really like an update to the Forge Cleric, I think. I think the Forge Cleric has a lot of really cool flavor and very cool features in 2014. I think that it could go further. I think they could delve deeper into the actual act of creation and the act of kind of like sub-artificer style kitting out the rest of your party. With like temporary boons and things like that, not full artificer, providing your party with magical items and things of that nature. But if you're a Forge Cleric, if your thing is you are a vessel for the spirit of the Forge, I think that it can be more than just armor proficiencies and fire damage. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see an expansion on the Forge Cleric. I think really kind of just off the dome, I would love an update to the Swashbuckler Rogue as well.
That was one I was thinking about too.
I think the Swashbuckler is great as is, but much like the Forge Cleric, it can be a little bit more fleshed out. We can have more layers there. Rakish Audacity and Fancy Footwork, the two of those together, fantastic. Mm-hmm. Great coupling within the same subclass. I would love to see even more versatility with how you can achieve sneak attacks. I would love to see a cunning action variation for the Swashbuckler, have something in that realm included. So I think those are my 2 big answers right now: the Swashbuckler and the Forge Domain Cleric.
Well, and with the addition of the cunning strikes in the new rogue build, I think there's just so much room to add subclass specific strikes
for any all subclasses for rogues should be getting.
Phantom should
subclass
get an
specific
update with some subclass specific stuff.
The Phantom would be such a good one.
Yeah. I'm also really. I think that's a big pick. For me, I love the College of Spirits Bard. Flavor-wise, and a lot of the mechanics I like, but I do think it's ripe for an update that just makes it a little more so. I think it falls into kind of the same issue that the Alchemist Artificer does, where there's a little maybe too much randomness to the utility, and you don't always get the thing that you would find most useful in any moment. So maybe some way to sort of hedge that around a bit would be very nice. But I love the Spirits Bard conceptually so much, and I'd love to see that updated. I think some more Paladin subclasses would be great. The ones I'm specifically thinking of are like I think the Watchers is really cool, and you could throw some more lore even into it. And make it really, really thematic. So I'd love to see that. Honorable mention to the Cavalier, which I think desperately needs an
update. Cavalier is going to be like the Purple Dragon Knight, where they just need to ditch all of the features. Just take all of them out and rebuild it from scratch, because it really is not... it's not a Cavalier subclass. That's just the title of it.
Not to get too deep into it, but I know that the updated Purple Dragon Knight does sort of reduce or remove a lot of the existing lore that was around the Purple Dragon Knight, and makes it into a knight that fights with a dragon,
which is very
which is not
strange.
What the original one was all right. The original one was also known as the Banneret,
right?
Because its deal was that it was like
a warlord, warlord type of deal.
Yeah. But I think its biggest failing was that all it did was allow you to use your own single-use features on other people. it didn't really give you a lot of additional versatility and new features. It was like keep your own features, but now you can spend them elsewhere. And that's just disappointing. And so I feel like by cutting out that aspect of the Purple Dragon Knight in this update, they've removed the only battlefield control fighter subclass. So something should find its way into filling that slot, I think.
To be fair, though, nobody was picking that subclass before anyway. May as well have not even had had one before.
Yeah. It just feels like a gap in the game to not have that sort of character archetype easily available to play.
I suppose you pick Battlemaster, right? And then you can take all of the field control maneuvers. That would be your battlefield.
Yeah, you could
controller.
do some of that. You could do some of that.
Commander's Strike and bait and switch and things like that.
Well, I'm certainly excited just to see what comes up. I know they also added a bunch more subclasses that aren't updates, but they're brand new, totally fresh. So I'll be interested to dig into some of those as well once I get my hands on the sort of full details.
Yeah, that'll be good. It seems like a pretty diverse selection, too. There's a ranger in there. There's a sorcerer, a new barbarian, a new bard. So it kind of spreads the wealth across a lot of different types of classes, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Michael, shall we get into our creations from the day? I would love to see what you made for your divination features.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun this week. Again, I only made 3 things. They were not my first options, and they kind of came to me later in the week, but I still like all 3 of them. So, Dan, if you would please open your document. I call these sort of predictions.
Excellent.
I wanted to focus on things that are available at low level. So I made an uncommon item, a common item, and a gaming set. I didn't want these to be hyper powerful. Like we were just talking about with Foresight, when things get up into the higher levels, spell-wise, item-wise, it becomes almost necessary to dilute them with mechanics to make them that strong, right? They don't have the luxury of just kind of sitting in a narrative space because then they're inherently less powerful. Yeah. So I wanted to stick very low level. Stay with things that are very basic. So my first item here is called the Kaleidoscope of Mourning. It's a wondrous item. It's uncommon. By turning the end cap of this polished brass tube and peering through it, you perceive all creatures as they would exist within their worst possible circumstance. Any knowledge gained or secrets revealed may or may not be true, and if true, you have no way of knowing for certain or where along the timeline of the creature's life this circumstance exists. And that's it. It just shows you the worst possible scenario for any creature that you perceive through this spyglass. And it could be totally false. It could be a total falsification, but it could be true.
Yeah.
There are no mechanics here. It is purely an item used to spur on a narrative progression, either for the character that's using the kaleidoscope or characters that are perceived through the kaleidoscope and kind of other actions are taken because of that perception.
This would be a crazy thing to find in a dungeon and just be like, what does this do? Look through it and you just see your companion like
oh God,
crying over each other's like dead
starving
bodies,
to death.
Yeah, like horrible things happening to them. Just like, is this reality? Is this telling the future? Is this like a shade of things to come? What is it? That'd be a very interesting and cool thing to stumble upon, and get the players sort of wheels turning on like what it could mean.
Yeah, I would hope that this would kind of be used as a prod to a yes and situation. Like, hey, this is what I saw. You can take this bait if you want, and we can go with it. Or like, no, like if you're not into that, we're totally fine here. But if this is something cool, or it could be an above table conversation beforehand that you and another player can kind of decide on something and you can't quite figure out how to get to a character moment.
Yeah.
Enter the Kaleidoscope of Morning, and this can be the catalyst for a big character switch.
Right, for sure. I mean, you can present this as a prompt to the player as sort of a character development sort of writing exercise to ask, like, what would this person see looking through this kaleidoscope at you? What do you think your worst possible circumstance would be? And maybe that's something that, like, hasn't been revealed yet, like your like a deep dark secret, or like a particular connection to someone outside or tertiary to the events of the campaign, and it can spur on maybe some role play and some, like, people growing those bonds together in not necessarily past trauma, but like the potential future of something horrible happening, and having to grapple with that potential reality. Yeah. It's a good little narrative device for sure. I like it.
Thank you. Moving to the second one, I have the Rain Stick of Predicting. This is a common, wondrous item. This hollow maple branch is stained a deep red-brown and has been filled with ball bearings. As an action, you can turn this stick either upside down or right side up and speak the words, "Looks like rain." As long as you can look directly upwards and see the sky, anytime in the next 24 hours, you can speak the words, "Yep, I predicted it," prompting light and harmless rainfall in a 30-foot radius area centered on you. The rain lasts for 10 minutes, and once it is finished, you can't quote-unquote predict rain again for 7 days.
I like that. That's fun.
You just get some rain. You just do a rain dance for a second. And that's it.
Looks like rain.
Yep. Oh, rain. Looks like rain. Yeah, I predicted it. Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
And then the one down here at the bottom, this is purely mechanics here. This is called the Diviner's Coin Purse. This is a gaming set. Within this small satin pouch, there are 5 identical golden coins. On one side of a coin is the image of a horseshoe, which signifies good luck. On the other, the image of a clock, signifying that your luck may not be very good after all. You can cast these 5 coins out onto any flat surface as an action, and the consequences of this multi-coin toss are decided according to the table below. So there are 6 possible results. If you throw 5 coins, you can get 5 horseshoes, 5 good lucks, 4 horseshoes and 1 clock, 3 horseshoes and 2 clocks, 3 clocks, 2 horseshoes, 4 clocks and 1 horseshoe, and 5 clocks, no horseshoes. And a gradient scale from great to terrible. These are the results. So if you have all 5 good luck sides up, you automatically succeed on a D20 test of your choice with a natural 20. So you give yourself a natural 20. You just have that in your back pocket. You can crit on an attack. You can guarantee a victory on a skill check. Great. 4 good lucks to 1 bad luck, you automatically succeed on your next D20 test.
Cool.
1 down from that, you have advantage on your next D20 test. Nice and simple. Down from there, you have disadvantage on your next D20 test. That's tipping the scales from horseshoes to clocks. So you have 3 to 2. Bad luck. 4 to 1 bad luck, you automatically fail your next D20 test, so the mirror of 4 horseshoes. And if you have 5 to 0 bad luck coins to good luck, your next 5 D20 tests count as natural ones.
Oof. That's a rough one.
Yeah, that's a rough one. So 1 in 6 chance to have a whole slew of failures on your hands. Once you cast the coins and fulfill their consequence, you can't do so again until the next dawn. If you do not have access to physical coins, feel free to roll any die included in a standard dice set. For example, using a D4, a 1 or 2 would represent a clock, and a 3 or 4 would represent a horseshoe. And that's it.
I like it. Yeah, it's just a fun little, like, fortune-telling kind of mechanic. It's a little more whimsical than, like, the augury wheel or woe or whatever. It's a little more individualized as well. I appreciate it. I like it. It's fun.
Thanks, man. And that's it. those are my 3 things that I made for the predictions. Really no work at all on the part of the Dungeon Master.
Yeah.
I suppose maybe some narrative heavy lifting if your players want some input from you as a game master for the Kaleidoscope. But that is kind of character development stuff that you would end up doing anyway if you have that sort of narratively driven character.
Yeah.
So not too terrible as far as DM preparation or prediction goes.
Yeah, I think that's great. It does the prompt well. You don't need to predict these major things about the future. The rain stick is a self-fulfilling prophecy almost to a degree, but in a way that I think is just really, it's not major. It's not like this world-changing thing. It's just a very simple little effect that, it can have some usefulness, right? If something is on fire and you don't want it to be on fire, that's a really great time for it to be raining.
Yeah, it's a great way to earn a lot of favor from a town that's having a drought.
Yeah,
you could save some farmers' crops doing this once a week.
It's also not
a nice 10 minutes of rainfall.
Not a terrible way to gain some, do a little bit of, hoodwinkery to some unsuspecting individuals when they don't believe that you can predict the future, but you happen to just predict that it's raining. And, maybe
I predicted
maybe
it.
They start to believe the next thing that you say is going to happen. So I could see that being very fun for
that is true.
For sort of a charlatan type character to play around with and to hoodwink a group of unsuspecting bandits or something.
The street magician that isn't actually a magician. He just has a bunch of tricks up his sleeve.
That's the kind of fun thing. I like it. Good stuff.
What about you?
So in thinking about this, I thought a lot about the mechanics that exist in D&D for telling the future. And like I said, things like augury and divination are just like you contact some extraplanar being to give you a sense of whether something in the next 30 minutes for augury, and it's like the next 7 days, a course of action over the next 7 days, what the result is likely to be. And really what you're doing when you're casting those spells is just, the DM is the one who answers. So the DM is the one who's like, well, you get woe on this. This thing you're going to do seems like it's not going to turn out very well. Which really is just, it's to use a loaded term, it's just metagaming, right? Like you're just taking metagame things of like, we want to ask the DM if this is a good idea, but you've taken it out of metagaming and you've given it a reason why it's not metagaming, because it's a spell that you cast, and now it's something in the world that has told you this is a bad idea, and it's not the DM. But like everybody knows, come on, like that's why you cast that spell.
Right.
You cast it to know if this is a good plan or not. And yes, there are some other edge cases for divination especially, where you're like, what happens if we don't do anything about this situation? And you can get a kind of answer of like, okay, we now understand the consequences in a deeper way. Now, me at my table, I'm always going to be more willing to give players roles to suss that out. Their players are, their characters are generally smart, so if they're dealing with a situation, I can maybe give them a sense of, a nature roll or an insight roll or something else that I can give them at least a little hint of maybe what you sense could happen, if this or that were to occur. Maybe it's an intelligence check, right? The players can find ways to use their skills to suss out, what's likely to happen. And so I don't really like those spells, but they're kind of the only thing that does anything like this in the game. But there is a game that does this sort of thing in a very creative and fun way. There's actually a few games that do it, but one specifically comes to mind, and that is Blades in the Dark. Are you aware of Blades in the Dark, Michael?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
For our listeners who might not be familiar with Blades in the Dark, it is primarily a heist-focused game. You are usually carrying out some sort of heist or jobs within sort of, sneaky, undergroundy
Stealth and
sort of vibes,
subterfuge.
yeah.
Yep.
Stealth and subterfuge. And so a core mechanic of the game is that during each job, all the players get flashback points that they can use to, in a single moment, they can use that and then describe a scene that happened in the past that explains how they prepared for this exact occurrence. And so instead of having to use what they have now to figure out how to get out of this situation, they instead say, oh, we already planned for this. And that just becomes real. And so the really robust mechanics in this for that sort of thing. So the one thing I want to say is I just want to encourage our players to play Blades in the Dark. Because that's a really fun thing. And it was really hard for me not to whole cloth steal that idea. And I kind of did. But what I would say, I didn't put it into mechanics. I didn't put it into the write-up. But I'll just say here, I think a great idea to do, and I encourage everybody to do it whenever you think about it, take a mechanic from a different game and put it into your game. So if you've got a heist story or something like that in your D&D game, just take that part of it. Say, okay, for this heist, each of you have one flashback point. You can use it at any time to explain how you planned for this particular occurrence, and that's reality now. So you don't have to have planned so intensely beforehand and had to ask me a million questions and cast augury to see if this or that was a good idea and figure out the layout of the building. We can get you in there and into the action much quicker, and then from there you can go crazy. So that's the thing I want to say. If there's ever any mechanics in another game that you think are cool, just use them. Even if it's just for a single sort of arc or moment in your game.
Another great thing from Blades in the Dark, while we're on this topic, is the encounter clock. Love that. Oh my gosh, I've used that for several sessions of D&D, and it is such a great tool to heighten tension organically without just putting characters at risk. It feels like a very fair way that a table-wide tension for everybody to kind of experience in real time. The encounter clock is great because you have however many pieces of a pie. If you think about Trivial Pursuit pie, you have 6 puzzle pieces or pie pieces, and each time something negative happens to the party, you take a piece away, and when you have no pieces left, something detrimental happens to your party. And it's such a good thing because you can link it to time expenditure. If your party goes 10 minutes without taking action, take a piece away. If they get spotted by a guard, take a piece away. If they don't convince somebody well enough of something, take a piece away. It's wonderful. A wonderful
Great
tool.
mechanic. Definitely use that one too. But let's get into my actual creation.
Yes.
What I ended up doing was making 2 spells.
Okay.
And that's it.
Love it.
The first one is a bit more complicated, so we'll go into it. But this spell is called Flashback. It is a 6th level divination spell. It requires 1 reaction, somatic components, material components, either a small hourglass or a pocket watch, and instantaneous effect. You can use your reaction after a creature within 60 feet of you that you can see uses an action to cast this spell, halting time momentarily while you recall past events. You can describe a moment in the last 12 hours where you planned for a way to avoid, change, or overcome the triggering action. This description cannot undo any actions that have already taken place or significantly alter reality beyond your DM's discretion. In casting this spell, so that's the basic thing.
Sure.
Which you can do to do a number of things. For example, you could use this to say, I flash back to 20 minutes ago when this NPC's back was turned. I put poison into that glass. Okay, cool. Now that's real, right? Now that has always been true. But there's this second piece of this, because sometimes you might want to have something else happen. In casting this spell, You can also choose to cast a single additional spell of 4th level or lower, expending a spell slot as normal. The effects of that spell take place as if you had cast it at the time of the moment you describe. For example, Freedom of Movement can be cast as part of this spell's casting in response to a creature triggering a restraining trap.
I love that.
Right? You can be like, oh, but it's okay because I cast Freedom of Movement already, knowing that there would be traps here.
Yeah.
It's a little way to like retcon, but within the mechanics of the game and while also giving up a resource.
This feels like the perfect spell to just give as a subclass feature for an Arcane Trickster rogue.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, it is 6th level, which I was like, do I want to bring it down to 5th so that an Arcane Trickster can get it? At 17th level,
their capstone. They just take this as their capstone feature. They just get to cast this.
Part of me is like, I should bring it down to 5th just so Arcane Tricksters can have access to it.
Yeah.
But I also, it felt very powerful for a 5th level spell, so I don't know.
I agree with 6th level. It's so good. Gosh, I would love this as like a moon druid that could cast it within wild shape. Like you're a little field mouse that's just observing something happening, and you cast this as a reaction to like a big moment, and the NPCs involved have no idea where it came from. This is fantastic. Yep. It's a very good assimilation of that flashback into D&D. I like it a lot.
And then using a higher level spell slot, you can upcast this to increase the level of the additional spell that you are able to cast by 1 level for each spell slot level above 6. So if you cast it at 7th level, you get to cast a 5th level or lower as an additional part of the casting. Again, the effects of the spell take place as if you had cast it at the time of the moment you describe, which is notable. So anything with an instantaneous effect is probably not going to be super useful to backcast.
Right.
Right. You know, because you can't, again, undo any actions that have already taken place. So you can't be like, oh, I already cast Fireball in this room. It's like, no, we described it already that, like, this person's been walking around this room and it's not burned to a crisp. So, like, that stretches.
It's going to end up being a lot of a lot of touch spells, a lot of buffs, like you said, freedom
buffs,
of
maybe
movement,
detect thoughts,
bless, things like
maybe
that.
detect magic,
detect thoughts.
Lots of other divination or like sensory utility spells can really come in clutch in this. This is really just opens the door for that moment that every party has had where it's like, oh gosh, I wish that, like, now seeing this situation, it would have been really clutch to have this spell going already. Right? But we didn't know that was going to happen. But if you have this spell loaded, you can kind of backlog that and say like, but maybe back then I did see this coming.
I like that a lot. That's a great spell.
I appreciate that. And again, it does like have that note of like at your DM's discretion. So, be nice to your DMs.
Can't go too crazy with it.
Can't just fully break reality. But there are lots of ways that I think fit into a totally reasonable reality that this could work very well in. So it's not exactly predicting the future, but it's sort of retconning predicting the future. It's saying, like, back in the past, I predicted this moment that we are inside of now.
Right.
The second spell that I have created here is Precognition. This is a 2nd level divination spell. Casting time of 1 action, range of self, verbal and somatic components, and a duration of 8 hours. This is sort of my answer to augury. For a while I had this in this document as revised augury, but I feel like it ended up diverting away from the concept of augury enough that I decided to rename it. You gain 2 fate points for the duration of this spell. After you take an action and witness its effects, you can take your reaction to expend a fate point and undo the effects of that action. You must then choose a different action to take. So you can't use the same action again in this thing. Like if you attempt to attack and fully miss, you can't just go back and then try to attack again. The idea being that like you take a hot second to see quickly just into the future just to see what that action does. And if you don't like it, you do a different thing.
I was going to say, this gives like self-holy driver energy where you're just imposing the change on yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
I like this a lot too. This is very cool.
And then when you use a higher level spell slot, you just gain additional fate points, 1 per additional level above second. The idea there is just, if you do something and it doesn't work out, or like you find out that this thing has a resistance you didn't see coming, well, now you know, and you can go back and not waste that spell slot, right? You can go back and do something else and make it work instead. And just have a little bit of minor precognition. So those are my little divination features. But I think the biggest note here is I think everyone should just probably use the flashback mechanic from Blades.
Well, I like these a lot, man. Agreed 100% about flashbacks. It makes storytelling more dynamic, and it makes your characters feel more heroic, like they actually pick up on things without actively having to make checks and predict what's going to happen.
It makes heists feel a lot more action packed and a lot more Steven Soderbergh-y. And that's very fun. That's very fun. Especially if you've got like an infiltration, stealth, sneaky mission in your D&D game, it really helps to keep those feeling like an action moment rather than kind of, it can sometimes get into a sloggy space, I think.
Right.
But those mechanics really, really help. So I encourage you all to play that game and use some of those mechanics.
What a good episode, man. I liked all of the... a low amount of creations.
Yeah.
I feel like we've steadily become more desensitized to creating mass amounts of things in a short amount of time. So it's nice to just have like room to breathe in the episode, because that doesn't happen very much anymore. It's nice to just pare down, keep things really simple. It's even though your spells were a little higher level, they don't feel complex, right? They're just powerful without needing a bunch of text to kind of explain away what's going on.
I mean, the flashback spell does have a fair bit of text, and I tried my best to make sure that it explains itself well in what is possible and what is not possible here. But there is definitely a degree to this, and I think to your kaleidoscope as well, that just it's going to be something that like is dependent on how your table communicates and wants to make that thing work.
Sure.
And in this case, it's very much the same. I think this spell could have effects at one table that would not be approved of by the DM at a different table. That's sometimes the nature of these things. There's an element of like wish and dream that have a little bit of that too, right? Where like the part of how it works is in your ability to like communicate that and come to an understanding with your DM of like what is allowed by the spell and at the table. So a similar case here, I think, where it's just don't, I guess, try and get away with what you can get away with, but like it's a good opportunity to collaborate in the moment on like what we think is possible, what would be cool here. I love when a player comes to me and is like, okay, I want to do some shenanigans. What do you think about this? And oftentimes I'm like, that sounds really, really cool and creative, and I would not have thought to do that.
Yeah.
And I think a spell like this, or in certain cases, Wish and Dream and some other stuff in the player's handbook are really great tools for that, because they have a little bit less mechanical text going on and involve some openness for you to say like, can I use this thing to do this?
Anything that leaves the door cracked for an outside option, because even Wish and Dream have suggested obvious uses, right? Like there are things that you can do with Wish and with Dream that are written into the text that say these are things that you can do with these spells. But also, there's a little bit of room over here for you to play with if you'd like. It's not required that you come up with something new on your own, but if you want to, like there is rope that is allowed for that type of thing. And both of these spells are like that, where it doesn't just have to come from the text, what you can do with them, which is really nice. I do want to shout out real quick the person that gave us this prompt, Wickwacket from the Discord, Steven, who we both are playing in a PvP game
Indeed.
with right now. This is a great prompt. This was a fantastic prompt, and I'm so happy that it was rolled. And it was very, very fun to build. And I hope that you enjoy these 5 creations. I hope they help in your game.
Certainly hope so. Like I did have this spell momentarily as just the you can cast a spell in the past.
Yeah.
But I really like exactly what you said there, right? Leaving the door open a crack to be like, it doesn't have to be a spell. Like, you can cast a spell in the past,
right,
and explain that. But another option is make something else real. Add a different aspect of reality to the game.
Right.
That's
make
a
check.
Exactly,
convince somebody of something in the past. Intimidate somebody in the past. Like you said, sleight of hand a poison into somebody's drink. Do something that doesn't change actions taken, but will affect what's happening now. That's a cool way to do it. Cool way to do it, man.
Yeah.
If you'd like to take a look at these creations, the PDFs are up on our Patreon right now. They are free for you to use at your home tables. That is patreon.com/College of Creation Pod. We are also on Blue Sky, the same name, Instagram, the same name. You can also send us an email at collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com. If you'd like to send us something a little bit more long-formed, that is also good. We've fielded emails and struck up really good conversations about prompts in the past. So we would love to hear from you.
For sure. Michael, we're not rolling for a prompt this week.
We certainly are not. Why is that, Dan?
Because it's time for Compendium Volume 2. We're going to go back into the archives once again. We already have gone through creations 1 through 10 from episodes 1 through 10 of this show. And we're going to do it again. We're doing it with 11 through 20. Next episode, we will be rehashing the creations from episodes 11 through 15, which was a whole wide and cool array of things, including moving monster, Pokemon monsters, druid spells, spell scroll alternatives, and randomized rogues. A good array of different features that we all came up with, and making some edits, making some changes,
Indeed.
seeing if there's any way we can improve them before putting them back up on the Patreon once more. Michael.
Dan.
It's been great podcasting with you. Do you have anything to say to the people before we say goodbye?
Dan, I always have something to say to the people before we say goodbye. Today, I just want to give an update. A couple episodes ago, maybe a month ago, I said that I was embarking as a player in the campaign of one of my players for the first time he has DM'd a game. And just as an update to that, the game is fantastic. This is a person that's never DM'd anything before. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. And he's taken his idea, it's a totally original idea that he came up with in a homebrewed section of our world that we play in at my table. And he's really just run with everything that he's written down, and it's fantastic to see. So, if you at a table are thinking to yourself, I could never do that, you can, and I think that you should try it. Even if it's a little small game that only takes 2 or 3 sessions, or just 1 session, or just part of 1 session. Start small if you feel like you need to, but you absolutely can run a game if it's something that you're committed to learning how to do.
You can. 1,000% you can. The biggest secret that we keep as DMs is that it's not that hard, actually.
Right. And the second biggest secret that we keep is that a lot of the time we don't know what we're doing. And we're looking up rules right alongside all of you.
Right. That's 100% the thing. I think there is this air of mystique around the DM that says like, oh, these people have
infinite
crafted
knowledge.
this, and they know the game perfectly, and they have spent hours and hours like perfecting every element of the world and knowing
Poring
every
over
single
the rules.
connection
Yeah. No
of each
way.
piece of lore. Absolutely not. I make that stuff up so
All the time.
frequently.
All the time. Yeah.
I had a new player who I knew was coming in to our most recent session beforehand, and he's friends with another one of the players in the game. So we had maybe around a week or so to kind of figure out, how that was going to work and what character idea was and how it was going to fold into the rest of the party and how it connected to the pieces of lore. That was great. It gave me time to prep and stuff like that. And then someone joined the game around 26 hours before the game time. And I mean, it was fine. She's an experienced player, and I got in touch with her, and we made character and stuff like this, but I had like almost no time to actually prep. How are we going to fold you into the game? What is the first thing that you all are going to encounter? Because now the plans have to change around this new idea. And I came up with this stuff like truly maybe an hour or so before the actual session. And I just ran with it, and I let the characters breathe with their characters as they got to know each other and met each other. And I was like, we don't have to rush into anything. We're good. Just like let them take their time.
Yeah.
And it was fine. That's the great thing. It was fine. Everybody had a great time. Everybody felt like they were engaged in the session and with each other as characters. Done. Great. Easy.
Perfect. We love to see it.
We're always making stuff up.
So you can too.
If you can play it, you can run it.
Absolutely.
That's what I said. If you can play it, you can run it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan, as always. Thanks, everybody who listened today. Thanks, Stephen, for the great prompt. We will talk to you all once again a week from now, next Monday.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.